Be the friend to the unlovable, and you will change the world.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
So my name is Diana Oestreich, and I am a soldier turned peacemaker. I spent 397 days on the battlefield of the Iraq War, where I ended up laying down my weapon, and I had a battlefield conversion to spending my life for peace. I live on the most beautiful unceded Ojibwe territory you'll ever see on the shores of Lake Superior. I am raising one Black son to know his worth and one white son to work for justice. I'm married to a handsome man who loves competitive card games, and we love jokes, bad jokes, any jokes, a little bit of pranks, and we love to mountain bike also. So that is a little bit about me. I have also been a sexual assault nurse, a cancer hospice nurse, and I am fun and have light hobbies. Just don't bring me to a party, because if anyone asks me what I do, it sounds a little bit like a Debbie the Downer, but I do have fun hobbies.
Kay Stoops. I have spent my life being a Salvation Army minister and nurse, and in the slums and the Boweries of cities. And I have 4 sons, 15 grandchildren, and 21 great-grandchildren.
Wow, Kay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And 3 sons were military, 2 brothers, and 3 grandsons and 5 nephews. All different branches of the military.
It does tend to run in the family. Both my parents served, and my cousins and my uncles and my grandpas and I feel like the family tree ends up looking a little bit like a flagpole.
4 of them came out and became Salvation Army ministers.
Oh, beautiful.
We're here for nonviolence and bullying, I understood. And I got some experience with that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty beautiful that the UN created this day, this International Day of Nonviolence, to celebrate it on Gandhi's birthday of October 2nd, since he was the one who created this strategy of nonviolence. And I did have to look it up, but I think one of the most amazing quotes they had from Gandhi, it said that nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. Which I think is pretty incredible, because Kay, both you and I come from military families, and I'm a combat veteran. I was a medic in the Iraq War. And I think even today, I feel like we have more weapons than we've ever had on the planet today. And we also feel more insecure, and there's a lot of violence. And so I think just the fact that we have a day to talk about nonviolence, that Gandhi said that nonviolence is actually the most mightiest weapon that we still have and we can still use, even in a time when it's a little scary out there. I think most people feel more insecure and a little more scared of violence than we ever have today.
That might be, we're not as centered in our home as much. Children don't get to know their parents don't like that. I never liked voices that went high. I said, then you go outdoors. You don't do that here. And fighting and arguing, I didn't put up with that. because I didn't want my children to learn to think that they could just hit and bang and other people, that wasn't. And I was a little upset at times when school kids would be bullying, pushing, shoving. I got that when I was a child, and I was scared to death to go to school because my father was a minister, and I just took the brunt of, there goes Kay with her Sunday dress on, or there goes Kay running home to mom. There go, and I was the oldest, and I sort of took the brunt of that kind of a thing.
So back then, Kay, you experienced bullying going to school.
Oh, yes, very much so. If you looked different than the other kids, and if you weren't as had plentiful things like the others, then a whole group of boys and girls would just pick on you till you wondered if you were ever going to get a friend. And then I finally got 3 faithful friends that I've had right up until now.
Wow, so you still have those friends.
Yeah, even though I've traveled, I'm out of Ohio for 45 years, and I traveled, the Salvation Army assigned you like the military. We went New England, Canada, New York City, lots of time in New York City, into Arizona, and then back to Rhode Island. And then I found my way back to Ohio.
Wow.
But a lot of counseling in those Bowery places were because young people didn't know how to express themselves without being nasty, without being mad, without being blaming everybody else on their situation. And I just sort of had to love them out of that and say, wait a minute, there's a better way than hitting and screaming. And but they got it sometimes from their folks.
Yeah, I think it's, well, Kay, let's just be honest here. Let's throw it out there. I'm a lady, you're a lady. I'm
Sure.
41. What's your age?
78.
Okay. Because I think a lot of people like to, they like to throw the age out there, and they're just like, well, nowadays kids are just like this because of TV. But you're 78 and you knew bullying when you were growing up. And my kids, they went to kindergarten and got bullied. So I think people are people. And so I don't think people change. And I think that this is a universal thing, that people kind of pop out, and there's this instinct that says if anybody looks different, looks different, worships a little different, parents are different, then as a group, we kind of like to gang up on them, make ourselves feel a little better.
And we were from the country. And then my age, we still didn't have telephones and TV and indoor plumbing. Some we were country Ohio. Yeah. And in the 40s, you were privileged if you had a phone. And the first phone I saw was a crank phone that you held the speaker. And but my parents thought it was a luxury and said we don't afford the phone, so we didn't have it. But it wasn't until 1967 before I ever had a TV.
Right. And it might be different today, but I think it's still that instinct that, and it's not just kids who want to us versus them on, do you got the cool thing or are you the kid who doesn't? I think it's still adults, because I was just on a podcast with a woman who was a veteran. She was in the Air Force, and her job was to investigate any suicides or attempted suicides in the military, which I have done some research on it, because after being in the war, I really felt like there's a connection between combat and its effect on veterans. And I really
Right.
wanted to find out some of this. And the numbers were really tricky to come by. And I was like, do you mind if I ask you about it? And she's like, yeah, it is really tricky to come by. They kind of don't want people to know. But what she found out was, because this was her job within the Air Force, was to really find out what were some of these factors, because they really wanted to care for veterans. So they really wanted to find out, how do we prevent some of the factors that service people are attempting suicide? And guess what she found out, Kay? Bullying was one
Right.
of the major factors. And guess what else she found out that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so true, but I don't want it to be true. She said that bullying one-to-one isn't as harmful because it doesn't ever happen one-to-one. She said that we always bully people as a group. She said it's not very fun if you come in and say, hey, everybody, Joe's really fat and ugly. No one sit with him at the lunch table. But she said we never do it that way. We always say, hey, everybody, doesn't Joe stink? Everybody, let's not play with Joe. And she said, as adults in the military, as a workplace, we bully people as a group, which one is really heartbreaking, and two, why don't we grow up past the schoolyard? Like, this is really, really awful. This is men and women in uniform who are bullying other men and women who are serving our country, to the point.
Even in my profession, I found that the more power someone has, the more even your superiors, who are supposed to be equal to you, they aren't. They come at you because they're afraid you're going to work your way up to that place. And that kind of bullying in the workplace really is hurtful. It made me so shy. I'd cry in a book report, run out of and it wasn't until after I finished seminary that I said, wait a minute, it's time for me to take hold of my life and not let that happen.
What did you do?
I went out of my shell. All of a sudden, I didn't have a hard time when I had to speak at Kiwanis or Lions Club, or I was able to do it. And I thought, oh boy, did I ever get called the wrong work if I couldn't do that. But when I said, take every bit of me and make something out of me, it suddenly, within a couple of weeks, happened. My husband said, are you the same Kay? I said, yes. But the problem was he did not like that. And over the years, he became the mental bully.
Really?
And so then I experienced that for like 50 years.
Wow.
Before I came down and I said, I cannot take this a bit, because if I wasn't on time coming home from a football game, which I love and went by myself, if I wasn't on time getting back, because he hated them, if I went shopping and I wasn't where he wanted me to be, then I got really preyed upon. And no one knew that within my family or house until the last 4 or 5 years of that. And finally, he said, I didn't want to be a nurse because at that time I was having some illness, because I have polio. And then suddenly he says, I'm leaving. I don't want to be married. And he left. And he just passed away, a sad, lonely man with no grandchildren, children, no one with him, because he shut them out. But that's where that bullying just came back, I think, to bite him. Okay. And he didn't know how to get out of it.
I don't know if I should tell you I'm sorry, or you actually got lucky that he left.
I came out of that, and I do better now than I've ever done in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm happier. I like being with me alone. I don't get crazy about it. He said, I learned to like me,
Well, I think you're pretty incredible.
but that's what I went through to get to there. And I'm doing great here at Hudson. I just teach a couple classes and
Thank you for sharing that, because that's a brave story to admit that if you are somebody who is seeing verbal violence or even verbal abuse or physical stuff, whether it is if you're at the store or even if it's in your own home, one of the best things you can do, all you have to do is say 3 words. And these are the magical 3 words that the studies say will stop a bullying instance in 90 seconds. And I truly believe it will also make sure that you will heal in the future from watching it. So the 3 words that you say is, hey, stop that. So in my kids' elementary school, they did a bullying session for the whole year. And the studies say that if you witness something and if a bystander just says those 3 words, hey, stop that, typically that bullying instance stops in 90 seconds if someone says that, because 1, it just interrupts things.
they
And
have to
then
stop and think.
2, it just kind of like jogs the bullier and lets somebody know, like, I see you. And then 2, it also lets the person know that's happening to them, that someone recognizes that, hey, this isn't okay. Like, you don't deserve that. And then 3, to the person who's watching it, which actually can be kind of harmful to you in the future, no matter what happens after that, you know that you said something. And that is actually going to be really important for you to heal in the future. And I actually will add a 4th thing in there, because I think that really is giving that person who is doing that bullying a magical, like, redo from the universe that is giving them 1 second chance to say, do you really want to do this? And you don't get a lot of second chances in life. So it's just giving them a momentary, like, do you really want to do this? So
And
all
he
you have to
was
say is, hey,
raised,
stop that.
yeah, he was raised to think men could do anything, but never a woman. And I was raised the opposite, that you learn mom was just as equal as dad. In fact, he called her his queen. Don't you dare, she's the queen of this house. And but he was raised that boys do one thing and girls do another, and never the two should meet. And I didn't know that till later. And to me, divorce was out of this, not even a question. But everybody else thought he was the most perfect man ever. Even my family, until about 15 years ago, they said something's wrong. And I said, yeah. Finally, I was willing. He took me to Arizona so I wouldn't be near any family or anything. So I got suspicious. I said, there's a reason for this. And then one day he said, you can cook. But that's all he said. Not the fact that I helped him get where he got, and from captain to major to so on. Not the fact that there were other things. We raised 4 boys, and who's the one that did the most part of that? It was none of that. It was just said, you can cook. And I just was deflated. And that was about the end. It was just a few years that I could.
And the thing is, if you notice that, and if you see those like imbalances where one person gets to be a full human being who gets wants and needs and a career, and the other person just kind of gets to like be the servant, then you can, if you see that in your friends or your family, you can just kind of raise the red flag. Those are
in this
imbalances of
this
power.
profession, husband and wife must go to seminary. You have to marry another officer.
Oh.
And so you're a team. And this team got a little out of balance. And I kept saying, what am I doing wrong? That he never has a compliment. But that was, I learned, was he couldn't do that with the boys. He couldn't compliment anybody. It had to always be him. So he was very, what do you call it? He was very engaged in what people thought about him and not of all of us.
And I
He
had
didn't
worked.
include us all.
I worked I trained as a sexual assault nurse, which is a specially trained registered nurse
Right.
to take care of anyone who's been sexually assaulted. And one of the things that I did learn in my training, and my faith tradition is as a Christian, but I did learn that a lot of Christian faith traditions actually help, just by some of how they teach things, they create imbalances between genders that actually teach that it's okay for males to abuse females within a marriage relationship. Just certain traditions
His parents
interpret
never
that.
even
And so I was pretty
got to high
heartbroken.
school, so they
So
taught
it's
this thing.
good to know. I was like, oh no, my faith tradition actually can create some of these abuses, but at least it gave me the red flag to notice that some people that I knew might actually be experiencing that.
That's strange that you said the sexual assault. My training in counseling was with abortion to help women who didn't take it well to get back to loving themselves and going forward and not always looking backwards. And that's where my training went into that. And I still do it by internet now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I keep up with that. And some of the other kinds of assaults that come because of sexual assault. It can ruin a woman forever.
And violence can come in a lot of different ways, and it's not always just physical. There's also just anybody who is a little bit different. So people tend to be less safe if they look different. So anybody who is Black or brown, or maybe they are Native or they look Muslim, they actually are less safe in society. Or if they love differently. So LGBTQ people, they actually have more crimes done against them. And so I think that's also another thing to look at. It's not, violence can just be how people are treated, or they're less safe in the grocery store. They're less safe.
There's so
just walk into their
mental
car.
that I think sometimes the emotional harm is even worse with mental abuse. That person doesn't feel they're good for anything because of the way they've been squashed. And mental abuse, I found, was really a hard egg to crack.
It is. So there's just more ways that if we can change all these biases of how kind of our country has chosen to see different people as less, if we can actually choose to include people, then everybody gets to feel safer. And I feel like the place that you live could actually be a place where people, instead of continuing these biases, you could actually be the place that actually creates a better community and can be a role model. Because I feel like your generation isn't the greatest generation because of the past. You could actually be the people that actually is a hopeful place for our kids to be, to look up to. Because like a lot of people, we're raising kids and we're tired, and I feel like your community and your generation could actually be the place that shows us hopeful stories of new friendships and hopeful places of rebuilding and healing these places.
I teach a class here. I call it adult it brings in Bible study, but it's adult getting along in the community
Wow.
so that they welcome others into here. We started an ambassadors club for that. And they made me president. And that way we get ambassadors that will meet new people at the door,
I love that.
bring them in, show them their apartment, make sure they know how to get to the dining room and make an appointment maybe to meet them there. But it's just, and we have a tea of welcome every time we get a group. And then the chef makes scones that are out of this world and tea, and we have
You gotta mail me one. That sounds lovely. I love tea and scones.
Scones I really like. Sometimes they're hard. He makes the most beautiful scones.
Kay, I love that.
Tea, but then on Wednesdays, that's why Wednesdays are full for me. I do this teaching of a class, and I've had even some men decided they wanted to come, and I said, sure, you come. And we just discuss. Today we were discussing how we can be good shepherds, because sheep can be kind of hard to shepherd.
A little hard-headed, as they're known.
They drown themselves drinking. They don't know how to take care of themselves. But if you have a good shepherd, you can guide them.
I love that, Kay, because some people think that it's just a more violent world, and it's actually harder to be peaceful right now. And I don't actually think that's true. I think that we're actually made with this irrepressible goodness in us, that we actually want to be good
There's always
friends
a hole
to
in
each
there
other.
that needs to be filled with our inner self and with God and so on and so forth.
I think that God made us loving, with that chip off the old block, that we're made with love to love each other. But it's just going to take a little more courage to reach out and be loving to somebody, because it's easy to think that we have all the goodness inside us, and it's easy to fear somebody else and assume that we've got all the goodness and they don't have any goodness on their side. So I think it just takes little acts of courage, and I call that waging peace, because I was trained to wage war, and I've already done that. But I think waging peace actually takes more courage, because it's what you're doing. So. It's sitting down with people. It's getting to know somebody you might not already worship in their denomination, or you might not already vote or think the way they do, but it's choosing to believe that they've got some goodness that you don't already know about.
I think that's the problem today, is some of our children, like my children, are very outgoing. 2 of them are Salvation Army officers, and one's in charge of all of New York City.
Wow.
And he, of course, can tell you horror stories there. I worked there for quite a while myself. But he said, when you get through to somebody, it's such a joy. But they have a different perspective about all of this than I did, because they learned off of my mistakes and are busy making their own. But you still, if you raise a child, when he's old, he comes back home. And I have one that's just been diagnosed with MS. And he's had 2 remissions, and it's so hard to keep him encouraged, ready to go through the next thing. But thank goodness that's in us to do, the boys and I. And now the grandchildren that are all parents now. But being they were in the military, I think they learned the peace part better. It's not a clamp of some kind of horror on them. They said no. That was with a war that was being fought, but at home, it's a war against the part of us that's evil, the part of the world that's evil. And he said, we have to teach peace. But he said, where are some of our films and television taking us? And there again, I went once with, I won't go to our X-rated movies.
I didn't even know there were X-rated movies, Kay. I don't know what you've been watching in the movie theater.
And I said, no. So I go off to YouTube. But I went to a movie with some of the kids once, and I went in, and it started out with zooming and shoot. I took my Kindle, walked out, and sat in the lobby for the 3 hours. I always have a Kindle with me, and I just went out and read a book. And I said, I'm not going to listen to this kind of nonsense.
Yeah, I think it's different. I have 2 sons, and so raising 2 boys, they're 13 and 14 right now. So I came back from war. I was part of the preemptive strike of the Iraq War.
Right.
And so I came home, married my sweetheart, and we had 2 babies in 2 years. And so in the years when we were doing,
I had twins to start with.
You got me. We had 2 in 2 years because
in seminary I had them.
But Kay, in the potty training years where you're spending like forever in the bathroom, like waiting. But I had to explain a lot.
To have a party.
Right. And because they knew I had been in war, so all the little questions that little boys ask, I couldn't do the parent thing and be like, oh, I don't know about guns, or I don't know about war, or they knew I knew. And so I had to think hard.
One thing with the boys growing up, when I had the twins, I said, Lord, you got to make me a little boy. And I set out to do everything little boys do. Those Matchbox cars, Legos, whatever. Then when they got older, I took them from 3 years old on to the football games by myself. I'd pick them up and off and go. And then I had them read a book between homework so they wouldn't get sick of homework. And to this day, my husband used to say, how do you talk to those boys for an hour? I said, we have books to discuss. I better know who's number 1 in every sport you can think of. Hockey, baseball, football, you name it. I'm from Massillon. They were raised somewhat in Canada. And then the books. I went to visit them when they were all first married. There was the same books I was reading. So we would discuss books. The ones that are pastors, we'd discuss sermons. And I was just into everything. And I just said to him, if you would have learned to be a little boy, you'd have the same privilege.
Sounds like you learned to be a friend, because a friend stays interested in what a friend is interested in.
I had 3 of them call me today. And they wanted to discuss how my Bible study went, and the one's getting ready to start his. And we sort of just share back and forth.
Well, Kay, if you want to meet my sons, they are in my book. And they think I wrote a book, and it's called Waging Peace.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And there's some photos in the middle of it, and there's some stories with them in it, because they were kind of part of my going to war and coming home and growing up story. Yeah. And they think I'm the cat's meow. And whenever I'm a little nervous to do something, they're like, Mom, you're an author. Come on, you can do anything. So to have 2 little kids hype you up.
Mom can't do anything wrong. And I said, yes, Mom.
But one thing is really true, that to teach boys that they have a power that is bigger than violence, that they don't have to be the biggest, baddest, meanest, strongest kid in the room, that their power is bigger than that their power is to do good in the world, that is going to be bigger than anything else. And I feel like that's the thing that kids and people like that's the power of love and nonviolence, to say you don't have to be the strongest person in the room, but if you're the person who is going to be the biggest friend to the most vulnerable person in your classroom, at your lunch table, or the person on your floor who nobody else wants to be friends with, that's your superpower.
Yeah.
And that is the power of nonviolence that Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Jesus said. Like, be the friend to the unlovable and you will change the world. And that's the story that I think we all want to see. And that's the story that we're going to teach our kids and our friends, and we're going to keep talking about.
It's better to do good than to tear everything apart. I mean, shooting at each other is sure not going to solve anything, except innocents getting killed at each other. But if you take that mindset of, yes, let's find a way through our scouts, through some way, that the mindset of peaceful living is better than the other kind.
It is difficult to be nonviolent in today's world. And I think the more that we see violence in the last 4 years and
especially
more,
in the big cities.
I think that, and the more we see people get more adamant that their way is the only way, I think that it does feel like you have to bring your opinions, or maybe get stronger in your own camp. And at the same time, I don't know that it's ever been any worse than it is today. In fact, I think that that's always been the temptation. And yet I look back and I go to church with a lot of snowy white hairs, snowy white heads. And I look around at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, they're the pioneers. They were marching with Martin Luther King, and it was much worse when their children were going to school and they were desegregating schools
in Cambridge, Boston.
Yeah, so
there was the people marching, and they have babies in strollers, and the guns were going. And I said, how can they put their babies in that situation? But I've been through, my mother said I would do it, that fashion would change at least 4 times before you die. And life has changed, but not for the better. We had it bad, all kinds of things happening from World War II to all the different wars. We had all of that in our psyche, but every generation has to find a way to be peaceful. And if we aren't, we're in big trouble. And then this divisiveness we have today can be too strong if we're not careful.
I think that every generation has to decide to do their work and to not sit on their butt. And I think there's been a lot, because I have 2 sons, and one is black and one is white. And there is very few people who did the work. So, I mean, 60 years ago, they couldn't go to the same school.
Right.
And there are very few people who sacrificed so that they could go to the same school today. And there's a bunch of people who just went along their little lives and did not sacrifice. And so I think the sacrifice landed on very few. And the people who did it were nonviolent. And so I think that this, the work, people need to do the work, and choosing to do it nonviolent is the highest good possible, but it will cost you the most sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that those are the people we remember. That is Martin Luther King, and that is Gandhi, and that is Mother Teresa. And Jesus did no act of violence in his lifetime. And so I think that at the end of the day, we have a goodness in us, and we need a better invitation. And the invitation to violence is lowbrow, and it is superficial, and it is pretty short term. And so I think there is a goodness in us, and I want to invite people to do that good invitation that says, let's work for something good together, and let's do it with that good that good that is possible. And I think there is good. And if you ask anybody, they already think they're the good person in the conversation, in politics, in religion. So you're just asking people to show up and actually do the good that they already think that they're good, that they're already doing. And it's going to take courage to do that good.
Started a group called The Kindness. She gave us all kind bars. She said, now, whether it be employee of somebody outside the building or another thing, give them this and tell them it's for being kind, and give them the kind bars. That has gone like lightning around here because they're thinking about how to say something nice to each other or find the good in everybody.
Right. So it's going to require sacrifice to be nonviolent. And I think that it's going to require change. And if it costs nothing, then you're not doing it right. Courage means you're going to have to give up something of your own to make room for somebody else. And I guess that's the call to the generation, is what will you give up of yours to make room for someone else to have an opportunity or a seat at the table? And I think we can do that. And waging peace is going to require courage, and we can do it on the daily. And I think that we all have that chance to do it. And I think instead of bemoaning that it's kind of a little crazy time and everybody can be sad about it, or we can just get to work. And I think now is the time that we build something better. And I think we can do it. And it's actually healthy for us to just get to work, because we're tired of just watching sad headlines roll. Let's just do something better.
A little thing, like the other day, I was a little bit sharp with Cameron. It was a Wednesday and I was exhausted. By the time you plan for a class and study and everything, and I was kind of short with him. And I went back to I said, tomorrow I'm making that right. Just went to him, apologized. And that way, if you start with those little things, the next time you'll have courage for a bigger.
That's great. Yeah, it's the little things. If anybody would like to support me, you will get it hand signed by me, delivered to you right from my little writing stuga from the shores of Lake Superior. It is dianaoestreich.com, or you can go to wagingpeacebook.com and order it directly from me. And you can also sign up to the Waging Peace Project if you would like to learn a little bit more about how you can just start to commit one act of courage per day. It's a group project, because I think that we are the people who get to wage peace. We're not waiting to elect somebody or it's somebody else. I just think it's us in our neighborhoods is going to be our classroom, and we're going to create a better place.
Peace starts with me. And
peace starts with me.
We used to sing that song. Yeah, it's got to start somewhere, and it might as well be you.
Right? I think it's just us. We're going to do the best, most fun group project ever. So you can go to dianaoestreich.com, or you can find my book, and you can also sign up. I'll send you the Waging Peace Project if you want to get more information on how to do it.
Yeah, that's one thing you'll find here. I have a lineup of people want me to use the computer. They said, we don't know how to set that up, because I just order everything they want or get information.
Kay, your group should do my book club. If people do, if your book club does my book, I zoom in for your group. I've made a lot of fun friends.
Yeah, we had one before COVID, but I don't know if they started it since COVID. I just love to read. I spend so much time with my Kindle and anything else I can get if it's words on it.
And it is on Kindle. It's an ebook too.
My dad said you learned your letters, and from there you never got your nose out of a book.
Well, great to meet you, Kay. It was so lovely to meet you. And I think to myself, what a